Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to our channel, Chat Nation. Today, we will be discussing on the rights of the laborers, fact check, promises and delivery. The eminent panelists joining us on this discussion today are Councillor Baiju Thittala, Solicitor and politician, Cambridge City Councillor, joining us from United Kingdom. Welcome, Mr. Thittala.
Thank you. I am here. Thank you.
Yeah. And Professor Ujjwal Chowdhury, Pro Vice Chancellor, Adamas University, joining us from India. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. I'm talking from Kolkata, eastern part of India.
Thank you. We have Susan Cueva, trade union activist and human rights advocate and campaigner, also joining us from United Kingdom. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. I'm coming from London, joining you from London.
Thank you. And we have Mr. C.P. John, ex-planning board member, huge advocate for the laborers, the trade union activist, also joining us from India. Welcome, Mr. John.
Hello. Welcome.
Okay. To take you around on our topic and today, we all know that the first lockdown came with just a few hours' notice. The COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown crisis have had an untold impact on migrant laborers and informal workers, and all these have been highlighted with the lack of compassion from the union government and overall laxity in providing relief to the poor, also to the civil society as well. The migrants responded, hunger can kill us before the virus. This is how things have been happening in the past few months. Am I audible to all of you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So today we will discuss on the issues pertaining to the marginalized section of our society, which is the laborers and the migrant laborers. And I would like to start with Mr. C.P. John. John.
Yes.
The question to you is,
right.
What are workers' rights and responsibilities during the outbreak?
Unfortunately, I would say, in India, the labor is taken for granted. Even the policy makers were not talking about the labor, but they were talking about the poor, the guys of labor. And they thought that just by giving few kilograms of food, like wheat or rice, their duty is over. And as far as the labor is concerned, as far as the labor is concerned, it is not at all entitled anything from the state. That is the number one. So they have to bargain with their respective employers to get something as the labor. When they go home, if they are poor enough, they may or may not get some kilograms of rice from the state. So my point is, the labor in India has been thrown to the mercy of the employer, even before the COVID scenario. So when the COVID broke out, the government has not spoken anything about the labor per se. On the other hand, the state went in collusion with the employer to curtail the rights they had. For example, some state governments, the regional governments, as you know, they reduced the right of the labor time, working time, meaning they said 8 hours is not enough. You work for 12 hours. So the right, as far as the working time was concerned, it was curtailed. Even that was curtailed. Number one. Number two, unlike United Kingdom, the state did not support the employer also to give some amount of salary to the labor. From the UK experience, I heard that there is a retention scheme by the state, by the UK government. They said you can retain the labor and we shall provide you some quantity of money. But as far as India is concerned, the state government, central or state governments have not even thought about such a thing. That has been happening even in UK and even in United States. So the Indian labor is at the mercy of their employer. And moreover, 93% of the employees or workers have no employer at all. Then how they are living? They are not able to eat what they want to eat. They get, of course, the only thing distributed to them is 15 kilograms or 10 kilograms of rice and wheat. There ends the matter. So my question is, how other state government, other states are working across the world. And as far as my party is concerned, my trade union is concerned, we have been demanding for the compensation at least for the deceased due to the COVID. Since the insurance system is practically nil as far as the labor is concerned, there is no life insurance at all. Even if it exists, they are not able to entertain it. So we demanded 1 million rupees for the deceased if they are dead due to COVID. But the governments are pretending that, or they are just discarding that demand, and they are not even ready to listen that demand. That is number 2. And the insurance schemes have failed. The only insurance existing as far as COVID is concerned is life insurance. And again, coming to the so-called schemes for the labor. For example, the welfare funds in Kerala is very famous. I was one of the chairmen of one of the labor welfare boards. Yesterday, before this meeting, for getting prepared for this meeting, I called the chairman of the biggest welfare board, in which 1.5 million workers are enrolled, and these workers have been remitting money in this board. Imagine, government offered 1,000 rupees to them from the board, but as you asked me, the delivery percentage is less than 50%. The last 4 months, government of Kerala is not able to distribute the money entitled to the labor, owned by the labor, to the labor due to the lack of efficiency. This is the position here. And across the board, 40% salary has been cut.
Okay. And how do you respond to that, Baiju? In your part of the world, how it is happening in the United Kingdom, and how do you perceive this vis-a-vis Indian context? Baiju, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
So how do you respond to this? How is things at your end in United Kingdom? How is the government responding to this kind of situations? What's the situation there? And how do you compare it with the Indian context?
Thank you, Melwyn. Despite being the fact that I completely disagree with conservative policies, being a Labour councillor, in my mind and my view is this: if you compare the Indian question and the British question, you cannot even compare. You cannot put this together. A straightforward one-word sentence. I tell you why. When this country was locked down, the government, what government have declared a special package which provided 80% of their wages would be paid into their personal bank account through their employer. And again, they made another condition to it, that no employees are allowed to work. In that context, employees were not allowed to work, but the state paid them 80% of their wages. And these rights were across the board. All employees, all those who fit into the criteria of an employee is entitled to get this. And then they have another provision, which is for the self-employed people, such as taxi drivers, courier collection agents, so on and so forth, whereby they get somewhere about 7,500 pounds in 3 months' time. And moreover,
how much is like you're talking about pounds? We want to know it in rupees as well. In India,
in India, it would be
200
I think,
for an easier thing.
okay, yeah. See, so that means
75,000 rupees. 75,000 rupees.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was always scoring 0 marks on my mathematics at the school level, so I can't.
No issues. But you are dealing in pounds now.
Exactly, I'm saying in pounds. Exactly. So not only that, government made another rule whereby no tenants would be evicted for 3 months' time. No landlord, and even look at the way in which the law is made in this country, where the court did not have jurisdiction to hear or accept the applications of a tenant eviction. Whereas what we have done in India, simply shut the door and ask them to just go home. And in British context, and at least till end of this month, end of next month, they will get paid by the state 80% of their wages. So the people, and there are other, other rights. Like if they want to make someone to be a redundant, they still can keep them. They can still prolong them. They can invoke the job retention scheme, whereby they will get paid this 80%. And I have done few kind of cases in that context where the employee felt that the employer had failed to furlough because of their age, or because of their race, because in a way discrimination. So now what I'm trying to say is this: in this country, the government up until now have managed to pay the bare minimum for the existence of the laborers or the employees. And do you want me to?
And I would like to.
Yeah, go on.
No, that's fine. I would like to ask Professor Chowdhury. As very rightly put by Mr. Thittala, the scenario there in the UK, in Indian context. How do you perceive the response of the government to the COVID-19 crisis? Should the government have dealt with this in a humanitarian way? Because this emergency should have been dealt in a humanitarian way. So how do you respond to that? How do you perceive the response of the government?
Before getting into what government has done, let me first note, Council of Monitoring Indian Economy has noted that 17 crores, or in other words, 170 million jobs, blue-collared, white-collared migrants together, 170 million jobs have been lost since March 15. This is Council for Monitoring Indian Economy Statistics. So that is the level of the crisis that we are into. And what is the government's response? 20,000 lakhs crores, or $22 billion was claimed to be, $10 billion, 20,000 lakhs crores will be around $10 billion,
yes,
was claimed to be the package, which is almost 9.8, or let's say 10% of the Indian GDP, was claimed to be the package just to grab headlines. The real transfer of money is 2% of the actual transfer, in actual transfer. 2% of this entire money. 500 rupees. 500 rupees is not even $10. I think around $8. $8 a month was given by the government to around 190 million people, families. Just $8 a month was given as a relief, which even by Indian standards is abysmally low. At this point, government has said 5 kilograms of rice and 1 kilogram of lentils will be given. But there is no promise of universal average, universal coverage of ration. The ration that has to be given across is not been taken. Then let me come to another aspect. Rajasthan government, before the Rajasthan government, let me tell that there has been an attempt since 2014 to encroach upon the rights of the labor. From 2014, Centre has amended labor laws, codified some of them in a different language, and issued advisories, etc., in the name of ease of business and attract foreign investment. And this was carried forward by Rajasthan, the then Rajasthan government of Vasundhara Raje Scindia, who pushed a large number of workers out of the coverage of the laws like Factories Act of 1948 and Contract Labor Act of 1970. However, the entire country was having resistance from the workers, particularly even including the pro-government workers body, which is Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, BMS, and surely the left and the centrist organizations, HMS, C2, AINTUC, AITUC, UTUC, all these trade unions were protesting. So the governments could not get along with these changes, but there was stiff resistance. But taking advantage of the pandemic situation now, unfortunately, laws are being amended by the states left, right, and center. And this is to be understood. And let me note, uniform reforms, unfinished reforms agenda is what the governments are claiming, and thereby increasing hours of work to 12 instead of 8 hours. You all know, we all know, 8 hours a day is a hard-earned right of the labor. But it has been increased to 12 in many states now without half-day additional pay. You are asking them to work for 4 hours more without additional half-day pay. Permitting use of contract labor for all types of work, thereby doing away with permanent labor or permanent employees. Ease of firing workers, clamping down on the trade union rights, because contract labor does not have the full trade union rights, and whittling down the labor inspector. These have now been done in the assemblies, either by passing an act in the state assemblies of the provinces of India or by ordinance as in UP. So Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, UP and Madhya Pradesh, all 4 BJP ruled governments have already decided for 12 hours a day, 72 hours a week, without trade union rights for the contract labor. And further, this Factories Act has been diluted now by some of the opposition ruled governments also, like Punjab, Odisha and Maharashtra. The BJP government of Goa has joined now hands with them. UP has come out with a temporary exemption from certain labor laws ordinance. Nothing to hide, it's open. They're naming the law as exemption from certain labor laws. 92% of the existing labor laws in the state have been suspended for 3 years. And to the extent that the Chief Minister of UP has said that if a labor now wants to leave the boundaries of Uttar Pradesh and want to work in factories and fields of the other states, they have to take permission from the Labor Ministry of UP government, which is against the freedom of right to move and settle anywhere in the country. In that manner, to that extent, Melwyn working in Delhi, I have been working in Bombay, Delhi and Pune. We are also migrant labor in that sense. The only difference is we are reasonably well-paid or white-collar migrant labor. Melwyn is an entrepreneur, though. I have been a laborer, a professional, and that's also a migrant labor. So these are some of the situations that we have in India, and I must note before closing, there are 3 types of migrant labor: skilled permanent migrant labor, semi-skilled seasonal migrant labor, and unskilled nomadic migrant labor. The skilled permanent migrant labor, like people like us, professors or engineers, or people like managers, they have a reasonably better off situation there in the middle class bracket. Semi-skilled seasonal migrant labor has started walking back, and a large number of them have gone back to their states from the urban centers where they were employed. The worst situation is of the nomadic migrant labor. They are wandering people, they are mobile people, they are taken by the labor contractor to a site, they work there for a few months. When the project is over and there is no work, they're again, packed off in trucks in a very inhuman manner and then taken to another place. They are the worst affected because no security. Most of them even do not have bank accounts. In spite of the Jan Dhan claims, they don't have bank accounts. So basically they get cash and they spend the cash just to survive anyhow. So we need to really look at, and there is another category of workers, scheme workers. The workers under ICDS, National Health Mission, NHM, Anganwadi, ASHA, midday meal workers, these scheme workers. These scheme workers also, their rights have been all put on hold. And their protection, self-protection, because they're asked to be COVID frontline workers now to support the health workers like doctors and nurses, they are now being used. But without any protection like PPE and other things, except masks and gloves, nothing is actually there for protection. And this 50 lakhs, if they die of COVID, that 50 lakh scheme, which is for the doctors and the nurses, this scheme has not been extended to the scheme workers, though they are doing the worst part of the health work actually. I conclude by saying, right to universal health care for workers and people of India, particularly workers and the poor, is important. Can you believe that our nation or government spends 2.4% of the annual budget in public health care, whereas the standard in any country is anything between 6 and 10%? So let's have at least 6% GDP for public health. And one point I also want to note here, just before and after the lockdown, the last month payment before the lockdown and the few weeks that some people have worked even after the announcement of the lockdown in some way, these wages have not been cleared, particularly the last month before the lockdown. And they were forced out of the factories. They were forced out of their homes by the landlords. And they had to walk, and you know the story, I don't want to get into that. How many migrants, what sort of painful situation they went through. And therefore, these sort of unpaid wages needs to be paid. I agree with Melwyn that welfare is a government's concern, profitability is of business, and the government has failed in that concern. Thank you.
Strong words there, Professor Chowdhury, very strong words. And I would like to come back to you on two things, to you and Mr. John, is that 1979, the government of India legislated Interstate Migrant Workman Act. Also the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897. It's a colonial edict. And before that, I would like to go back to Susan. Susan, you have listened to what Professor Chowdhury has said here. Can you shed some lights on the guidance on protecting workers, right? And also, how do you perceive whatever is happening in India and whatever the Professor Chowdhury has said right now? How do you perceive that from a human rights perspective? Susan.
Okay, well, I wanted to also kind of bring out the issue of the effect of COVID to migrant workers in the UK, because I know Baiju has explained how the UK government responded by providing the furlough and job retention scheme to many workers in the UK. But there are some places and some workers who have not been benefiting from this government program. And many of them, unfortunately, are migrant workers, right? And this is really not a very good situation because we know that in the UK, many of those people who died are in the frontline work of the COVID response, which are mainly the healthcare workers, social care workers, people working in the groceries and transport workers and all that. And this is where a large number of migrant workers work. And therefore, the number of deaths is very high with migrants and Black and ethnic minority workers in the UK. Now, when the furlough scheme was put out by the government after negotiations from the Trade Union Congress in the UK, they only gave it to what Baiju has explained already. But there are migrant workers in the UK who are not able to benefit from this. For example, if you are a migrant with limited leave to remain, that means that you don't have the full residency in the UK, and that you're working in what they call the work which is either 0-hour contract or as agency on temporary work or on a kind of informal work, then there is no way for you to be able to get the furlough job retention schemes. And then there's another section of the migrant community in the UK, the ones that we call the undocumented migrants, who have come to the UK and lost their ability to have their visa and therefore are not registered to be able to work in the UK. Those people lost their jobs without any notice from their employer. They were dismissed by the employer without, some of them are not even be paid from their last work within February or March before the lockdown happened. They were completely removed from their work without any compensation and without any ability to get support from the government retention program or the furlough payment that Baiju has explained already. And there, at the moment, they said there's million people in the UK who are in these kind of situations. In addition to that are those who are migrants who have very limited leave to remain in terms of visa in the UK, who are also not benefiting from this. They are in a very dire situation. They also don't have access to the healthcare services, similar to what our colleagues from India are expressing, because those people have no, what we call no recourse to public funds kind of limitation to their stay in the UK. So the problem we have is that the many migrants community, a large number of Indian workers in the UK are in the health and social care sector. And they were one of the worst hit by death and infection in the community. Some of the families of our colleagues from migrant workers have no recourse to public funds. And therefore, when their partner, husband or wife, lost their jobs, they couldn't even go to the government to ask for universal credit or support for paying their rent. So a lot of them are being threatened with eviction from their houses. Although what Baiju said, it is correct that the eviction has been made suspended. But now, with the uneasing of the lockdown, many of them now are being notified by their landlord that they will evict them if they don't pay the rent. But now, where will they get the money to pay rent? They're migrants and they were in the informal sector of the work in the UK, and they haven't got back their jobs because the economy hasn't properly recovered itself, and they're not getting new workers. A lot of that they're working in our hotel, in restaurants, in the informal sector, that they are not able to put back their kind of business back into force again. So these are the kind of issues, and I think there's some similarity to the kind of migrant groupings that was described earlier, because these are the different kind of groupings of migrants, and they have all been affected by the very hostile environment that the UK government had put out even before the lockdown happened. Before the lockdown happened, there are already a lot of limitations to the rights as human beings, to the rights as workers. And then when the lockdown happened, it highlighted the kind of inhumanity and the kind of lack of compassion from the UK government towards the migrant workers here in the UK.
Thank you, Susan. And I would like to ask John to respond. You know, we have heard Professor Chowdhury and even Susan's their statements. You know, John, is there a need for emergency relief measures, kind of a revival package like a New Deal, the urgency of instituting a certain universal right as social security measures to cope with any future crisis now? You know, the importance of the state fulfilling its basic constitutional obligations. John? John, are you there? Yeah.
Okay.
John, did you get my question? Do you want me to repeat?
Yeah, I heard your question. I heard your question.
Okay, thank you.
I fully agree with Ujjwal Chowdhury regarding the situation in our country. And moreover, the new situation, the new normal has come, and we are aware of the new normal as far as the labor is concerned. So what I like to have from this debate is, what are the proposals we are putting forward? I think that can be the productivity of this debate. So we have to, of course, we have to narrate things. We have done it, and all of us are endorsing each other. But instead of narrating it again and again, my point is, what we have to demand from the labor side. One thing is very clear. As far as the government of India is concerned, they are not at all bothered about the labor at all, the labor rights at all. And they are pro-employer, and even the employers are not supported by the government to support the labor. We demanded some quantity of money distributed to the employers to be distributed to the labor from the ESI. But the government is not aware of it. Government is not concerned about it. So I put 3-4 things as the demands. Number one is the compensation for the deceased, the compensation for the dead, not only for the labor, general. Why I am demanding this? Number one, the people who are dead belong to middle class or lower middle class or working class, majority of them. So their families are in doldrums. They are not able to give back the money they had taken from small banks or some other money lenders. So an immediate help in the tune of 1 million rupees, 10 lakhs rupees must be given to the deceased. That is the number one demand. Moreover, the stress level among the people, among the labor, is very high. It is not the problem of the debt. See, take, for example, an auto rickshaw driver. He has a loan. I'm working in cooperative sector and cooperative banks. He has a loan of, say, for example, 5 lakhs. What his family is thinking about, if I die with 5 lakhs rupees as a loan, nobody will look after my family and I will lose my life. Moreover, I will lose my property also. So the stress level among the labor is so high, and so many people are committing suicide. The statistics of the increased number of suicide has not yet come. And for all these things, I like to put this demand on record, that is compensation for the deceased due to the COVID. Second point is, Why can't the government issue food coupons? Of course, they are giving some quantity of wheat or rice. It is nothing but a few kilograms of carbohydrate. What about egg? What about other things for the what other cooking materials? It is not in the ration shop. You can't eat wheat and rice alone. They are not able to cook in so many houses. So they have to be supported either by these materials or by the food coupon. That is point number 2. Point number 3 is the support for the medicine. A good number of laborers are patients in the sense that hypertension or diabetes or any other non-communicable diseases. They are not able to buy their medicine. So the government should come forward to distribute medical coupons or medicine coupon so that they can go to the hospital, the medical shop, and they can have the medicines, those medicine they are having for a long time, especially for those above 45 years, 50 years. This is the point number 3. Point number 4 is Tamil Nadu government distributed 1,000 rupees to all households through the ration shops. It is the easiest method. As I told you, even the labor welfare boards in Kerala, the so-called welfare state, even the labor welfare boards are not able to distribute the money owned by the labor, remitted by the labor in the board within 3 months. So my proposal is make use of the PDS outlets. In Kerala, for example, with a population of 33 million, we have 15,000 ration shops or private distribution centers. So you please give at least 1,000 rupees per month to the labor, at least to the labor who are enrolled in labor welfare boards, or at least to the labor counted by the government in so many other ways. So these are 3-4 things to be done immediately. And again, there is a scheme in the banks. They call it, you need not remit the loans for time being. You can have a pause. But after the pause, what happens? They have to remit the loan with interest within the next 3-4 months. So the Reserve Bank of India or the central bank should come forward and say, if you pay, at least if you pay some quantity of money, the interest will be waived. So there is no loan waiver, there is no interest waiver. For at least for the labor, there must be a loan waiver or at least an interest waiver. If these things are not going to be done, even after the COVID scenario, even after the vaccines coming, even after the herd immunity, Indian labor community, Indian labor, millions of Indian labor will be at the mercy of Almighty, though I am a atheist. Nobody to look at them, nobody to take care of them. Their stress levels are increasing. Trade unions, I belong to HMS, Hindu Mazdoor Sabha, and I am one of the national executive members of the Hindu Mahasabha, Hindu Mazdoor Sabha. And of course, HMS, as Chowdhury said, HMS and INTUC, CITU, AITUC are all together to demand so many things. And as he said, the state is looking at this as an opportunity to push their right-wing labor reforms and privatization. Everything is getting privatized, meaning if all labor laws are cancelled for all practical purposes. I'm not against the private sector per se, but what do you mean by the privatization? Privatization means there is no labor law at all. So as he correctly said, plainly, bluntly, state governments are saying these laws are kept in abeyance for the next 6 months or 3 months. It means they are at the mercy of the employers who are only looking at the profit. So after the concluding my remarks, I would say, Melwyn, you please sit down and draft some demands. What is the outcome of the debate? We know each other. We know the demand. We know the problems. We have to come to the solution side. The discussions like this must produce something fruitful. What we have to demand. And I like to know whether there is any compensation mechanism anywhere in the world. So the learned people participating in this webinar may, after this webinar, find, is there any good practice across the world for the labor? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a very broad perspective analysis. And Baiju, would you like to respond to what John has said? And also adding on to that, I just want to say that migrant workers coming back home, what has happened in India and all, will swell the already desperate demand for work. In a context where unemployment is going to skyrocket now, even after the lockdown ends. So how do you analyze this employment loss? How do you analyze what John has said right now? And also giving a perspective, is there an alternative? Is there a solution across the world or worldwide? Baiju.
Thank you, Melvin. Let me put my argument into the debate. When Melvin mentioned to me about the fact check, and I was literally concentrating on what we were promised by our state, our Union of India, since the formation of since the independence of India. Let me quote one sentence, maybe two sentences, which is from Constituent Assembly, whereby the first Prime Minister of India put it, the Constituent Assembly is this: the first of this assembly is to make India independent by a new constitution through which starving people will get a complete meal and clothes, and each Indian will get the best option that he can progress himself in his life. Now we are into 2020. When we debate this issue, when considering what we were being promised by the Constitution of India, and plus, let me put this, in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said this: one man, one vote. But that is in a political right. But when it comes to the social and economical side of it, we are entering into a contradiction, which is one man has one vote when it comes to the political process. However, when it comes to the quality of life, the value of life, we are entering into a contradiction. It was said in 1949, the Constituent Assembly debate. Now, what we have seen here, when lockdown was announced, the Prime Minister of India asked the employers to pay them. No, it was not a demand. It was not a law. It was not a rule. It was not an order either. It was just a mere statement for the sake of it. And now look, even BBC reported the way in which our poor migrant workers are to go back to their hometown. And now, so far, what we have achieved since 1947 or 1950. Let me quote a couple of Supreme Court judgments. I'm not going to quote the entire the whole section of it. In 1991, Supreme Court judgment, where it says this: the health and strength of a worker is an integral part of right to life. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, international conventions of economic, social, and cultural rights recognize their need, which includes right to food, clothing, housing, and education. Right to physical and mental health protection of their families are integral part of the right to life. The maintenance of the health is the most imperative of the constitutional goal. Now, there are a series of case laws whereby the Supreme Court have demanded, the apex court of the country have demanded the state to make such arrangements where the workers will be protected. But even today, when we are debating about this catastrophe which hit the entire globe, look at the way in which our working class, our working population had suffered from this. And let me disagree with CP John on one account. CP suggests that we should have a compensation for the dead people, for the deceased people. I'm afraid I have to disagree with this. What we need to do urgent reforms, stringent law reforms, whereby if a person is deceased from a family, if they cannot make the payment or they cannot meet the end meets, all loans and all borrowing should be statutorily frozen. A debt consolidation package whereby upon death of a person, it should not be a mercy of the state to compensate. And this should not be only for this period of time. Entire period of the working population, entire period of the life of the working people, in the event of any catastrophe or any accident in the family, any debt that have been borrowed by expertise, bank, housing loans, or so on and so forth, has to be ceased. I'm not saying cease to exit. It has to be consolidated for such a period until then they can pay this money back. That has to be a policy.
Thank you so much and good night from Chat Nation.